Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the first episode of our EduCASTsyon podcast. I will be your host for today, and this is my co host, Sam,
Hello.
who will be joining me every week.
Good day, everyone. We're officially on air after our Christmas break, and it's been a long overdue holiday break with all of the class cancellations as a lot of people are getting sick all over the nation. And with the recent typhoon that taking place last December, the country has recently been through various difficulties. With the COVID and calamities, there are a lot of Filipinos affected. There have been businesses shutting down, employees losing their jobs, and schools suspending face to face learning. So, China, I'd like to ask, what do you think of the students out there who aren't able to go back to their studies?
Well, that is a lot, Sam, and as someone who is experiencing struggles with the current setup of attaining quality education, it is really hard to simulate the convenience of having dedicated learning environment. This is in fact coming from someone who is given the opportunity to learn without much hassle. It is also given the fact that I am supported by both of my parents. With this in mind, I have a hard time comprehending the struggles of those who have less than me.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, just imagine if the students from well off families are already having a difficult time, then what of those who can't afford even the basic necessities in their everyday lives? Well, I guess our listeners are already feeling the heat right off the bat. But before we delve deeper into our topic, why don't we introduce what this podcast is all about?
So, for those who already didn't know, every week we basically sit down to talk about our views about the current situation of our educational system here in the Philippines, from discrepancies between urban and rural curriculum, infrastructures, learning institutions, and so on. We're hoping to bring in a few valued guests with relevant backgrounds to give you a wider understanding of how this has and will continue to affect our country's overall development. Speaking of perspectives, what are your thoughts about discrepancies between urban and rural education, Sam?
Well, for me, as someone who has experienced both rural and urban education, I can vouch that there really is a gap in the ways of achieving higher education, especially given the circumstances of public schools, particularly in rural areas from far flung places. They have, well, most of the time, outdated ways of teaching and learning. And this, I think, is what leaves behind the students from underdeveloped institutions as compared to schools with relatively good access to learning resources.
Yeah, I agree. And because I myself also transitioned from rural to urban learning institutions, just like a tale, a girl from the province turned city girl. Well, I must also mention that my family matters had a deep influence on my abilities and opportunities.
Yeah, of course.
In any case, if you yourself is a provinciana and someone who hailed from the province, I guess even your fellow countrymen will experience a culture shock, simply because cities have much more accessibility when it comes to development.
Well, yeah, it's a given how capital regions tend to have more access to further municipal development. However, it just goes to show how far the developmental gap is from rural and urban areas with infrastructure and cultural perspective differences around the nation.
That is so true. And although in recent years there are central district businesses popping up outside of Metro Manila area, albeit just a few, which helps boost the economy of that certain region, which in turn attracts investments, which in turn also subconsciously develop its surrounding areas and region, but rather slowly.
Yeah, and that's actually the point I was going to make. Because even though there are a lot of central district businesses, it's so concentrated in one area that it neglects its slowly developing surroundings. So, why don't we take a closer look at these discrepancies, shall we?
Uh-huh. And according to K-12 academics, the roots of the problems can be traced from the establishment of the educational system in the country, which has been deemed to be problematic to begin with.
So, before K to 12 even existed, there were already issues regarding the educational system in the Philippines, right?
Yes, unfortunately, Sam. And such as poverty or lack of resources, family matters, high cost of education, accessibility of school, transportation, and the list could go on and on and on. Not to mention increasing dropout rates.
Yeah, actually, The annual poverty indicator survey conducted back in 2004 showed that lack of personal interest was one of the leading causes of why students drop out.
That is really heavy and correct. Our history has a lot to unfold that we still don't know.
And along with the global pandemic affecting communities all over the world, the country has taken its toll with how it's able to cope up with the ongoing rise of COVID cases.
You're right, Sam. And this pandemic even worsened the cases for a lot of Filipinos. I have actually observed continuous trendings on social media about academic freeze and the like that actually strongly indicate the struggle of Filipino students.
Yeah, agreed. Some may say that due to this pandemic, we are all in the same boat, but I have to disagree. I mean, as we mentioned a while ago, one just can't simply say that the privileged, or at least those who have financial stability, and those who were struggling or living off of minimum wages have the same concerns.
Yeah, I would have to agree with this disagree rather with the same thing. And well, same goes with students who have different stories about this pandemic.
It really is interesting to find these inconsistencies in our education as well, particularly between rural and urban areas. On the topic at hand, like we both said, the educational inconsistencies the current students face all come down to how well an institution delivers and produces results in the form of competent students.
But it's also because of that institutions, especially public institutions, can't receive adequate funding to produce results.
And with that being said, hopefully we'll be able to get into a deeper discussion on educational inadequacy in future episodes with our valued guest and uncovering how institutions operate on their curriculums.
That's right, and we might discover real stories about what's really happening.
Since there are also a number of factors aside from lack of interest and the increase of dropout rates, as we mentioned, poverty and family matters, which are seen as common factors, it is important to listen to their voices.
Sadly, these are still the same factors we continue to fight to attain quality education.
With inequality and corruption, we have a long way to run with our fellow Filipino students.
Well, whoa, that is a lot of discussion right there. And yep, we do have a long way to run. Unlike the segue to our socials.
So, anyways, our podcast aims to achieve something good for the greatness of our student body.
Raising awareness, voicing out our concerns, anything free in general, just like this segue to our advocacy campaign.
So, to our listeners out there, follow us on our social media platforms to keep you notified on our episodes. Follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and Spotify, which you can listen to for free. Now, back to the episode.
If, say, our roles switch, what do you think would you do if you were in their situation?
Well, of course, if I were in their situation, I would raise my voice. I would raise my concerns, of course.
Right, just what I thought. And that's what we are doing right now, to give them the spotlight and to let them know that we have not abandoned them.
Yeah, and especially with the advent of social media, we as students ourselves are able to reach a wider audience to raise awareness and advocacies in helping our fellow students.
That's right, partner. And with your help, we can reach the masses and gather support to address our concerns.
As an individual, we are able to inform the masses and the people we know, promote student welfare, and overall stand for the educational necessity younger generations need. We can help them catch up to the current standards that we are having.
So, if you want to hear more about us, then definitely subscribe.
If you do, then that would greatly help us out and reach a wider audience, and we gladly appreciate it.
We would also like to thank you for watching our podcast. And if you enjoyed it, well, we're delighted.
And with that being said, thanks for tuning in the EduCASTsyon podcast.
Yep, and please look forward to our next video and podcast episode. I've been your host, Tinay and
And I'm Samuel Torres, and we expect to see you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.
Bye!